What is up, and welcome back to the channel. We are your Colorado real estate family. All right, we got an interesting video for you guys. We covered Fort Collins quite a bit this last year, but what new has come in 2022 that might make you want to move into that city?
All right, let's go. Alright, if you're new to the channel, Chelsea and Pete here, and if you're interested in moving to Colorado, Denver, or any of the surrounding cities, do yourself a favor, hit the subscribe button and notification bell, because we put out new videos every single week.
Yeah guys, what we'd like to be is your boots on the ground experts. That way if you're planning on moving into Colorado from another state, listen, we're going to give you all the information that you need to know in regards to activities, cost of living, great houses, and where to be. And so with that, also licensed real estate agent here. I'm going to put my phone number in right below here, helping you out with all your real estate purchases if you're buying a house in Colorado, Denver, and any of the surrounding cities.
All right, so we're going to cover a fun one today, which is one of our favorites, is Fort Collins.
Foco.
And we've talked about Fort Collins a lot.
Yeah.
However, it is a brand new year, and we're going to start off with just some basics in case you're not familiar with the area of Fort Collins or Fort Collins, city of Fort Collins. So a couple things that I thought was so awesome is that recently Fort Collins had ranked top in the Livability's top 100 best places to live.
Well, I wouldn't even say that's recent. Like Fort Collins,
It's been
I
like
feel
that
like over the
pretty
last 5 years, it's always in the top 100, if not top 10. There was a few years that was #1 best place to live in the United States. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, it's actually ranked in top 4 for best places to live for families. We have talked about Fort Collins a lot, and there's just so much to love about Fort Collins. So if you're not familiar with Fort Collins, it is actually like what, the 4th most populous?
Yeah, it's the 4th most populous, so it's, you know, we got Colorado Springs is second, and then I believe it's Aurora.
In Denver, Denver. And then
Well, Denver's #1, obviously. Yeah. Yep.
So still, like, that's pretty crazy that Aurora made the cut. Boulder didn't, but Fort Collins did. So.
Yeah, and another thing too along those lines is it is our largest northern city, and
Yeah.
so pretty much Colorado Springs and Aurora are both south of Denver.
Yeah.
Our northernmost Colorado city is Fort Collins, and that's why it's one of the largest ones, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what you're probably most interested in if you're joining us here on the channel is the real estate. So let's talk a little bit about real estate in Fort Collins.
Yeah, so real estate in Fort Collins has gone up like crazy these last couple of years just because it's become so much more popular. Listen, with COVID happening, everyone realized that they can work from home more often, right? So even if you do have a job in Denver or say in another state and you could be a little bit more remote, Fort Collins is one of those great places that you want to live, maybe raise your family in, and still be able to work, via remote or via computer, Zoom. I mean, Zoom's like huge now. I feel like COVID made Zoom like blow up into this freaking insane amount of company. But yeah, so like I said, with that, Fort Collins, people are moving here. So of course, Fort Collins has become popular and the prices are going to go up. So you got a median price point of February of 2022 of $518,000. And that's pretty crazy for Fort Collins because I'd say, probably like 3 years ago, that was probably $100,000 less in regards to median sales price of homes down in Fort Collins.
Well, I will say though, like even looking at some of the, we took you guys on a tour on some of the neighborhoods, and broke it down by northeast, south, and west neighborhoods. And, you're starting to get very quickly into the $1 million close to the foothills. And so I think that those are driving, obviously, some of those prices
Yeah,
up.
and so just kind of giving you an idea of how much it's been up. So like year over year, we're talking like if we look at February 2021 to February of 2022, it's up 18.9% since, so that's over a year span. That's just showing how much the housing prices are going up in Fort Collins.
Yeah, but also we just had a client that we showed all around Fort Collins the other day, and there's still affordable houses to be found. Like there are still older houses, there's newer houses, there's newer development and things like that. So I do like the fact that there is some variety because we are able to capture kind of every client's need and not just the $1 million homes in the mountains, although we still help that. But definitely helps to know that there is still lower prices with some of the older homes or things that have been recently.
Well, not only that, but I feel like because Fort Collins is so spread out, you have a variety of all kinds of different things. And so like some things you might think about is, hey, I want to take advantage of Fort Collins, but maybe I want to be on the east side of I-25. There are some options over there as well too.
Yeah.
Or, if you want to be close to the mountains, of course there's always houses along there. If you haven't checked out our neighborhoods video, highly recommend checking them out. What do we have, 4 of them right around there?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, something like that. And so it's like I said, we kind of cover the hottest neighborhoods in Fort Collins, and they're at all kinds of different price points. We're talking price points all the way up in the millions, all the way down to like the 400s. So highly recommend checking that out if you do want to kind of get an idea about these neighborhoods that are inside of Fort Collins.
Absolutely. Okay, so we definitely need to talk about, we were kind of figuring out if we wanted to talk about this, but we're going to just because I think it's an important fact.
Well, it's a controversial topic for sure.
Yeah, but we're not going to address it in that manner. We're really just going to be talking about how conscious Fort Collins is when it came to COVID restrictions.
Yeah, the COVID restrictions were some of the worst in the state. Well, okay, not some of the worst, they were most restrictive in the state,
I was going to say,
right?
we're not going to have an opinion on it.
Exactly. And so it's one of those things, I mean, either way, whether you're pro COVID restrictions or against COVID restrictions, we wanted to give you guys a heads up. So with face masks, I mean, they were definitely requiring them that first time and second time around, sometimes longer than a lot of these other cities. And so it's something to kind of really think about. So if that does pop back around, because you never know, come this winter, and maybe they start putting those COVID restrictions in place, something to kind of keep in mind. And also with that too, there was some good things that came out of it. So we actually were showing some clients, and we were having lunch or breakfast with them down in downtown Fort Collins, and they were surprised the amount of small businesses and restaurants that lasted through COVID.
Yeah, I think that honestly, we being here and seeing some of the things shut down, you don't have a lot of perspective. And so we were a little sad to see, especially because we've talked about this a lot. Colorado is so local and they want to support local. And so when these really cool restaurants come into play, especially like downtown Fort Collins and all that, they get a lot of business. And so seeing some of these like kind of small, businesses shut down, like seemed like a lot to us. But when our clients just came in from another country and some from other states, they were actually so surprised. They were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that like it's not abandoned through all of Fort Collins downtown. I'm like, oh my gosh, what? But we also know that they got a lot more creative when it comes to how to follow the guidelines without having to shut down, like the outdoor seating.
They did a lot of outdoor seating. They had a lot of those pods. Because Colorado,
it's cold.
We get cold here, and so they were making up like all these pods so that people could sit in, so they could stay outside. And so, it was unfortunate. Like I said, some of the businesses that weren't able to last through it, but it's good to know that there were a lot of them that did last through it. But if you are coming into Colorado and Fort Collins specifically, that's something that we really want to kind of let you guys know. I mean, like I said, if you're against the COVID restrictions and the face masks and all that stuff, Fort Collins might not be for you, because they're definitely leaning a lot more towards that than they are the opposite.
Well, and just here's a perfect example. So we have a dear friend who lives up in Fort Collins, and she loves supporting local, and so she was walking into one of the small local shops, and unfortunately she was the boutiques. So I just rolled my eyes. So
I'm sure it's not the first time that you've done it on camera.
Oh my gosh, I get embarrassed when I roll my eyes on camera. Okay, so she walked in, and she was actually, if she didn't put a mask on, she wasn't going to be able to enter in. And so it's hard, because as a small business, whether they agree with it or don't agree with it, it's their job to kind of follow, and I mean for their survival, I'm sure, as well. And so it gets kind of sticky on what that looks like. So maybe if you're a small business owner and you're coming into Fort Collins and that isn't something that you're going to want to do, might be something to think about if you're a small business owner as well.
Yeah, Fort Collins was definitely cracking down on these small businesses to make sure that they were following the guidelines. And it's unfortunate that those small business owners are put in that position where someone comes in, they don't want to wear the face mask or whatever it might be. But I mean, it just is what it is. But it looks like it might have worked for them, because they do have so many businesses that still are open. And it sounds like a lot of them are thriving right now too. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so this is a new one that we wanted to talk about that we haven't actually talked about before, and that is Fort Collins Connection.
Yep. So Fort Collins, what they do is they have pretty much a city-ran broadband, right? So if you want, your internet, your phone, I think it's even applies to TV as well too, And so it's kind of cool. What they want to do is they want to focus on like community central, right? How can we kind of provide more services to our community? I think the broadbands for residential starts right around 60. And another good thing too is they also offer it up for businesses. And so that's something to kind of really know if you are moving into Colorado. People are always thinking about their infrastructure. What am I getting for internet? They do have a plan for you that's ran by the city. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I love it. It says, it was like saying something about created by you for you kind of thing, like created, from Fort Collins for you. So like it's just really cool to see a local solution to high
Yeah, I
demand.
mean, we've actually been seeing this more and more with a few of these cities. So, like, remember Longmont had that plan about having, you know, the fastest internet available to all of its Longmont residents. And so
Right.
these cities are kind of like catching on, like, all right, you know, we're going to do something for our residents and do something. And that's what you get with Fort Collins. Even though it's the fourth largest city in Colorado, it still has that small town feel. It still has that community feel, which is amazing for it being as large as it is.
Okay, so another thing that we thought was important to talk about, mainly because it's come up recently with some clients, is asking about diversity in certain areas. So, Fort Collins, is it diverse? Well, I don't think it's as diverse as some of our larger cities. So, if you're looking for something that's very diverse, it may or may not be for you. I think eventually, as our the I-25 area starts to close in from Denver to Fort Collins, we'll start to see a lot of different people kind of, you know, disperse around, and we'll have a little bit more of that diversity from our bigger cities. But right now, it really kind of hasn't been.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something where I feel like, you know, you should stay away from it because they're not that diverse. Because Fort Collins as a city is very accepting of all types of cultures, people, whatever
Yes,
it might
100%.
be. And so I really want to throw that in there. Everyone might think, oh, it's not that diverse, you know. So is it somewhere that I might not want to move? Or they are super friendly, super accepting of people. Like, so they do still kind of have that community thing where at first they were like, oh my God, all these people moving to Colorado or into Colorado and Fort Collins, get out of here.
But I don't think it had anything to do with diversity.
No,
it's
not
more
at all.
so just like being a little bit more crowded in what was like a small town feel. Colorado as a whole, and we've actually been getting a lot of questions about this, which we appreciate your guys' comments and questions. Colorado as a whole is pretty accepting of all things. And so, maybe if you're coming from different states, that's not something you're used to, but here, like, you really just don't have any of that.
No.
And of course, I'm sure certain areas are, crappier than others, but really Colorado as a whole is just really accepting all people, all different ways of thinking. And so, definitely not something I think you have to worry about if you're coming in to Fort Collins necessarily.
And I want to hit on something else real quick, guys. Like, when we're going out, when you constantly reach out to us and you're coming to Colorado, you want us to show you all these different areas, or you have these questions for us, that's huge for us because it also gives us some ideas for videos just like this one right here. We could answer those questions that you guys, because if we have one client that we're helping out in Colorado and they have a question, I guarantee there's probably a few of you out there that have the same question. And so we really try to be aware of all these questions you're asking while we're showing you these properties in Colorado. That way we could bring it to the channel too and kind of help answer those questions on here as well too.
Yeah, it's awesome because like a couple of our clients have come back saying, hey, I like that video. It's because it's something that we had talked about, and we were like, well, we should probably talk about that. We should elaborate on it and give some more information.
It's kind of cool too, because like when we do kind of make a video, we've had a few who are like, hey, I was asking you about that. Thanks for making that video. So it's cool that you're able to recognize that a little bit, and it's like that's what we're here for. We're here to help you guys out.
Yeah,
so,
if we knew all the right content, then we wouldn't need any of your feedback or encourage feedback. So it's really important to us.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about property taxes.
Yep. That's on me? All right, we're going to talk about property taxes. All right, so property taxes are a little bit higher up in your northern Colorado, or I guess more specifically Fort Collins, and we're looking at 0.65, right? With that, so Denver, just kind of give you a ratio, right? So like Fort Collins, 0.65. Denver, you're looking at closer to like 0.5.
Right.
North Denver Metro, I mean, I'd say it's anywhere between 0.7 and 0.8. When you do have the older houses and the assessments haven't really caught up with it as much as say these new builds, then it might be closer to 0.5, 0.6. But I'm saying Northern Denver Metro 0.7 to 0.8, where your national average is 1.07. So we're definitely below national average. One thing that you really need to keep your eye out on, which I've talked about in previous videos, is Gallagher was repealed. What did Gallagher do? What it did is essentially it put a ceiling on how high our property taxes could go year by year. With that being repealed, now these local municipalities could go through and throw different tax bills and such to raise property taxes in certain areas. So something to really keep in mind. Some say that it's going to open Pandora's box to hyperinflate Colorado's property taxes. I wouldn't go that far with it, but I'm just saying something to keep in mind. Hey, if you plan on moving to somewhere like Fort Collins, is there going to be anything coming down the line that's going to raise those property taxes up at all?
Yeah, and so if you're like me and you're like, okay, great, what does that percent mean to me? I did try to break it down a little bit by like, so if you're using like a $250,000 house, obviously you're going to double this in some of the certain areas because it's hard to find a $250,000 house right there. But if you're using $250,000 house, it's about $1,638 per year. So that would be Fort Collins. If you're looking at the national average at that 1.07, it's about $3,028. So just to give you an idea about what those yearly costs would equate to by those percentages.
Yeah, and so another thing to kind of keep in mind with the property tax as well too, we've talked about these metro tax districts. And so you might have that base property tax that you're thinking about, but some of these developers, when they're doing these brand new developments, is they pull out a bond in order to do all your infrastructure. So let's talk about all your sewer lines, your water lines, your streets, your sidewalks, and even sometimes some surrounding irrigation and such. They pull that bond out in order to pay for that, and then that's paid off by the people who purchased the properties, the brand new houses.
Right.
And so your property taxes might shoot from 0.7 all the way up to 1.5. And so it's something to really keep in mind, and something that we always try and help our clients out with when they're looking at buying a new property.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing what that responsibility is, because you might be only looking at one of those and not the other. So,
Yep.
Okay, so another thing that we wanted to talk about is crime. So this has come up a lot. Can say that Fort Collins has a much lower crime rate than some of our bigger cities. And I think that's just across the board, that when you're in a certain state, you know, obviously the larger cities are going to have the highest crime rate. One of the things that we do use for diversity and all kinds of different things is world population.
Rates, yeah.
Yeah, worldpopulationreview.com. So it's not that we don't want to share all information, but one thing that we really like to use in kind of breaking down different areas is that worldpopulationreview.com. We think it's really nice to be able to see a city as a whole, and you can just go in there and manually search each city and just kind of look for yourself all the different breakdowns as far as ages and everything.
Yep. Well, and I mean, we've kind of talked about with a few of this before, where you've asked about the crime. It's an obvious thing, right? If you're near the larger cities, you might experience a higher crime rate, whereas opposed to more in the outskirts, or the boonies, or whatever you call it, you know, you're going to experience a lower crime rate. So it's just kind of one of those things, but we always recommend going to World Population Review. Check it out, see what you think.
Yeah, and also we did talk about Colorado as a whole, which is very low in comparison to all the different 50 states. I believe, I can't remember exactly right now off the top of my head, but Colorado was very low on the crime rate scale as a whole. So that's kind of nice to know.
Very good. All right, let's dive into sales tax. So sales tax up in Fort Collins, you're looking at 7.55%, which is lower than Denver. Denver is like in the 8s, mid 8s, right around there, you know, and I think like, you know, we're in Fort, just another comparison too, we're like in the high 8s, almost 9%. And so just something to kind of think about. You want to kind of break out what's incorporated in that sales tax?
So Colorado as a whole is 2.9%, and Larimer County is 0.8%, and then Fort Collins is 3.85%. So that's how obviously Peter gets the 7.55%. And again, it's not bad in comparison to some of the surrounding cities. We know ourselves that we're higher than that over here. So
we've even had, what was it? We were buying a phone or something like that, and we told them that we were in Thornton, Colorado. Like,
they're like, oh, sorry, I gotta change the sales tax. We were like, oh, bummer. So we were all excited about the way it looked.
Where is that? I think it's one of our Missouri properties or something like that. It's either no sales tax or the sales tax is like crazy low.
I remember us getting the bill and we're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, we're so used to it now, like as part of just the cost of living, that we were like, say what?
Or they might have something where it's like some stuff has a sales tax and some, I don't know. But yeah, I just know that like a lot of the times when we're in these other states, the sales tax is definitely much lower. I can't speak to all the states, so I don't know where you're coming from, but I'm just saying from what we've experienced, I mean, it's definitely on the high side.
I would love to hear from you guys if you're coming in from out of state on how that compares to, you know, where you're living. I mean, I think it's really
well, it's always awesome. Like we try and look at like these larger cities in comparison when we talk about Denver or all the surrounding cities. We heard, I think one of you from Minneapolis or something like that, and said how your properties are your real estate's a lot lower price than it is here in Denver. So it's always cool, these cities that we don't think about, and then to hear from you guys about that. I mean, it's all about sharing the knowledge, right? And just kind of figuring out and just know from all these different cities. So
yeah, we want to bring all the knowledge that we can. I mean, the states that we have purchased in, obviously we know a lot about those. And so if you have something to say about where you're coming from, if 7.55 is relatively low, let us know. Comment down below. And yeah.
Well, until next time, guys.
Okay.
We love you.
Bye.